Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming to tonight's Planning and Development Control Committee meeting. My name is Omid Miri. I'm the chair of the committee. I'm just going to run through some housekeeping points before we get to the main item on the agenda. We only have one item today. So firstly, to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed to the council's YouTube channel. So by participating, you are consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm sounds, please leave the meeting calmly by the nearest exit, which is through the doors on the right and out the main entrance. And officers will direct you to the assembly point, which is on Blacks Road. And the meeting will then be adjourned and resumed as soon as we can carry on. Toilets can be found through the door at the back of the room on my right. And can I please ask everyone to introduce themselves before they start speaking? Thank you. Now we move on to item 1, which is apologies for absence. And we do have apologies from councillors Chavot-Verdier and Carmel. No further apologies. Item 2, declaration of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, if that can be recorded, please. And moving on to item 3, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of March, 2025. Are the minutes agreed? Okay, great. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 4, which is White City Central. And Jacques, whenever you're ready, could you please introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application relates to the central area of the White City Estate, which is now known as White City Central. I would firstly like to draw members' attention to the addendum. It's mostly all of them very minor points, but I'd like to just point out 2 of the main points. The first one is just on page 11, which is just a minor change to the officer's first recommendation. That is to allow a stage 2 GLA referral. And then on the overhead, on the other side, just the second to last point is just very late in the day, we have agreed a TFL contribution, which is 62,500, and that is towards step-free access and capacity scheme at White City London Underground Station. We have also, since the print of the application, received 2 additional letters from residents, but none of these raise any planning considerations that have not already been addressed in the report. It's a bit of a delay. On the screen now, you can see the application site. So it's quite small, but there's a second one that'll be more clear. This is just to show the wider context of the application. You can see to the north is Westway, the BBC buildings at 1 o'clock, and then the proximity of the White City Underground Station and also the Wood Lane Underground Station. To the west of the application site lies Wormald Park, and to the south is Loftus Road Stadium with nearby open space. This is an aerial view of the application site indicated in red, and you can see it's central to the White City Estate. White City Estate, as you can see in the image, is a majority is 5-story linear blocks, all residential. Within those linear blocks lies green courtyards. In terms of policy designations, the site is located within the White City Opportunity Area as designated by the London Plan. The site is also within the White City West Regeneration Area, which is to our local plan. And within the site lies the designated open space, which is known as OS30, which can be seen there. It's not as clear, and we'll come to a better drawing later, but it's OS30 you can see within the central area of the application site. And then lastly, on the northeastern corner within the application site lies the nature conservation area. In terms of the designated open space, OS30 is on the screen. You can see it's the dotted green space to the central of the site, which currently holds the adventure playground and a sports pitch and a community playground. And again, to the northeast lies the nature conservation area, which is an outdoor gym area at the moment. Just the local context of the surrounding area, as mentioned, it's the White City Estate is majority 5-story linear mansion blocks. There's also some U-shaped mansion blocks and some open-ended mansions. And further to the south lies Victorian terraces. This image shows the current active uses on site. If I do it clockwise, we have the 1 o'clock club to the north. And as we go clockwise, we have the housing office. And then the Adventure Playground building is to the east of the site in yellow. And then at the bottom to the southern side of the site lies the Randolph Beresford Early Years Centre. And then moving to the left is the Randolph Beresford Family Annex. And to the north of that, on the northwestern corner, lies the White City Community Centre. Not part of this application, but it's just worth stating that there's been some extensive co-production with this scheme from the dates from September 2020 to November 2022. Make Good was a consultant appointed by the council to carry out extensive program of pre-application engagement activities with residents. Following that, from November 22 to July 2024, for the submission, just before the submission of the planning application, the council's development team carry out further co-production activities until the planning permission was submitted. Following on the screen is just a list of those activities and the number of those activities that have taken place. There's some awareness raising gatherings, drop-in sessions, co-production sessions, activities with targeted audiences, exhibition events, and residents advisory panel meetings. And lastly, construction working group meetings, and lastly, meetings with on-site operators. Coming to the proposed development, planning permission is sought for the demolition of the existing buildings and structures and redevelopment of the site to provide 8 new buildings ranging from 1 to 6 stories to provide the following, which is 253 residential units, a new children's day nursery, and a new community centre. Together with that, it also seeks permission for refuse storage, cycle parking, blue badge parking, plus an all-weather games pitch and outdoor children's play facilities, and new hard and soft landscape. This is just looking at the master plan of the application. If I start at the top northwestern corner, that's the location of the new nursery. Just south of that lies the community centre. And then to the east lies Block B and Block C. It's just worth noting that there is no Block A. Block A represents either the nursery and the community centre. And then moving down to the south is 4 more residential blocks, Block D to Block G. And then opposite those, you can see the existing residential blocks, which is Champion House, Evans House, and then how many other one. Yeah. And in terms of the master plan, this is just a 3D image of the building heights. As mentioned, the majority of the White City estate currently is 5 stories. A lot of work has gone into keeping this development quite low. You could see, my cursor would work. Looking at the 4 buildings in the southern part of the application site, it has a 4-story parameter height with a setback 5th floor. And then the same on the eastern side is a 4th floor parameter height, and then a 5th floor setback. And again, opposite Mackay House, which is 5 stories, it was also taken to those central buildings which step down to 5 floors, where they go slightly higher within the central of the site, which is 6 stories. And then you could see here is the new nursery, which is a 2-story building, and also a large 1-story with a play space above, which we will come to later. Number 2 in the image is a 3-story community centre. Just in terms of the existing uses that we've gone through earlier, it's the image to the left, which shows the existing active uses on the site. And to the right, it shows the proposed community uses and the nursery. So it's the residential. The coloring there shows how those uses are consolidated into one building, and then the reprovision of the nursery. Looking now at the nursery in detail, there's been 4 design principles set out for the design of this nursery. If I go through them quickly, the first one is just a connection from entrance to the forest. You can see the image there. It was important to have that visual connection through the building from the back to the forest play at the rear of the building. The second one is classrooms without walls. Again, in the image, and we'll see later, is that all the classrooms open up to this play space at the back of the building. Number 4 is a multifaceted forest play space. We'll come to that in detail. And then lastly is just providing a helping hand for local families, which would also be making use of the building. This is just quickly the ground floor plan. And as we said, I'll show you that. Some of the classrooms here all open up to the rear. And the next one, at first floor level, there's additional accommodation at first floor, but there's a substantial play space on this area here. This is India Way looking north from the south, and that you could see an image of the proposed nursery. And then the image to the right is the rear of the nursery, which is that image. Just the last page on the nursery is just the floor areas. There's a slight increase from 1434 to 1574, which is a 140 square meter increase. The nursery was designed for 140, or is designed for 140 children, and that's kind of the amount that's been registered in the nursery for over the last 3 years. Now, looking at the community center, again, there's been some design principles for that. The first one is to create a new civic center in the center of the site. The second one is to provide a connection between the new Bridget Joyce Square and the Adventure Play space through the community center, to provide more flexibility for users within the set, which is shared spaces. And then lastly, an interior that feels part of the landscape. So very much not turning its back on the sides, but inviting the landscape inwards. If you look at the community center layout, as previously said, it's consolidated these uses. I've just listed the uses there, number 1 to 5, which is the White City Community Center itself, the housing office, the family annex, the Wanaka Club, and the Send provision. The ground floor, again, is just here shows the main hall in this area here. There's an image coming on that later. It's got a central entrance here, and then all the uses itself, all the uses within the building which share the main entrance and share facilities within the building. Looking at the first floor, just further accommodation for those users. And then lastly, the upper floor, there's a big games area in this location, which can be seen there. In terms of sizes of the active users going into the new community center is listed there. It should be used so there's existing versus proposed. It should be noted that there is a slight reduction in the floor area, but that is because a large number of floor space would actually be shared. So it's a better quality shared approach. This is an indicative image of the main hall of the community center. As part of the application, it's also proposed to have a temporary community building, and that is just to ensure continuity of the users on the site. So the site, they don't have to move off-site; they can remain on site until their new accommodation is ready to move into. This is just an image of these prefabricated buildings which would provide the temporary accommodation. It's mostly single-story. But you can see on the image to the right, there's some office space in the corner there, which creates a small 2-story element. This is just some examples of expected design for the temporary structure. If we move on to the proposed residential element, as I said, those are the 6 buildings which can be seen there, 6 linear blocks. They will provide a total of 253 residential units, and you can see there on the screen the mix from 1-beds to 4-bed 7-person units, and how that is equally spread across all the buildings. Looking at the affordable housing element, the scheme provides 127 affordable homes, which is 50% of the 253. 60% of that would be social rent tenure, which is the cheapest rent. and 40% would be intermediate tenure and delivered as shared ownership. Just looking at the quality of some of the units, and also explaining a bit about the layout of the linear blocks. The linear blocks is designed in such a way to maximize double aspect units, and you can see that it fares very well in terms of double aspect units, which is 77%. And you only get, which is the green bluey color, single aspect where it's not possible because of central core and lifts that's needed. If I just take you now through the site with some indicative views, taking you back, this is on India Way to the north, the main image, looking towards the new place space, and with the community center beyond, and block B could be seen there at that stage, and to the left is the nursery just peeking out. Moving down India Way to the south, if we look back, that's again, as we've seen that image previously of the new nursery. If we move further down south on India Way, you could see to the left-hand side is a proposal, block D, which is 4 storage with a setback 5. You can hardly just see the 5th floor peeking out slightly, and the existing accommodation of the estate on the right. This is just a further looking at closer to block D on India Way, which is what you've just seen. If we turn further east, looking east from India Way, this is again, block D still on the right-hand side, and the community center on the left behind this tree. This is looking into the new Bridget Joyce Square. This image is now taken within the new Bridget Joyce Square, looking east. With in front of us is the block B, 6-story accommodation, and block E, F on the right-hand side. Just turning back west within Bridget Joyce Square, this is the frontage of the community center. And further, another image looking down south coming from Mackay House. This is between the last 2 blocks to the south, looking up and seeing block C further into the master plan. If we look at landscape, first of all, if we look at trees, there are a number of trees on the site at the moment. There's 113 trees are existing. The majority of those trees are category C and U, which is unspecified. None of the category A trees, which is your best trees on site, none of them will be removed. Only a low number of the category B, and then there's a total loss of 85 trees. On the right-hand side, it shows the proposed scheme, the master plan, and it's proposed to plant 221 new trees within the boundary of the site. Just looking at further the landscape, looking at the central bit, which is Bridget Joyce Square. On the left-hand side, you see the existing Bridget Joyce Square highlighted in green. And on the right-hand side is a proposed, and you can see that they are a very, very similar size as proposed. Just this is zooming in on that Bridget Joyce Square. This image kind of shows the central vehicular access that's required for fire tenders to access the site, and also for general servicing. On that access road, is also worth mentioning that there are 3 parking spaces for the community hub and also 3 parking spaces for the nursery. The image indicates the east-west route, and a lot of time was spent for that east route to be as permeable as possible, that you can read where you are moving through the site. This is just that looking east into Bridget Joyce Square with the community center on your left-hand side. And the next image is actually looking back, so looking from the east-west into the site with Bridget Joyce Square in the central area there. This is just the nature conservation area, which we've previously mentioned is located to the northeast of the site in the corner. That is retained mostly, but it will form part of the forest play space for the new nursery. It's worth noting that, as I mentioned earlier, that the impact on the dedicated open space, on the left-hand side, it shows a dedicated open space in green, and on the right-hand side, it actually just focuses on the area that's built across that open space. The application has been advertised as a departure because it does affect the openness of the dedicated open space by reducing it by 40%. This is the existing proposed open space, and yeah, you can see that there is an increase in open space to provide it between the buildings compared to the existing. But more importantly, if we look at play, which is the next slide, on the left-hand side is the existing play. In terms of the private closed, which you can see the second point there, there's over 2,000 square meters of play currently on site, which is not accessible for residents or the public. And within the proposals, we do acknowledge that there is a reduction in play space of about 40% of the scheme. The figures that there shows the reduction of 40%. However, it's worth noting that the play here, which is the darker pinky color, that indicates only the play area, but actually beyond that is further open space which can also be used as play beyond that. Yeah, just back to the slide is the reduction, which is from 8,000 to 4,949. And we feel that the proposals increase the amount of higher quality and publicly accessible open space and play space. It takes a flexible approach, incorporating a forest play and nature garden. And lastly, provides a variety of play options, including a special education needs playground and a play on the way amenities. Just quickly looking at the urban greening factor, the target for the urban greening factor is set as at 0.4, and the scheme complies with that by being 0.489. This is just a summary of the benefits of the proposal. I'll go through them quickly. It's the optimization of a highly accessible and sustainable brownfield site, provision of a new highly sustainable and accessible community center and nursery, which provides new teaching, play, and education facilities, including a forest school, new housing, as we state, of 254 high-quality homes, of which 127 will be affordable, of which 76 will be social rent. Provides a new nursery facility, provision of a high-quality new community hub, new play facilities that are accessible to the wider community, including new adventure playground, a development that seeks to support sustainable environmental objectives. There's a 60% reduction in the carbon emissions, an opportunity for multiple economic and employment benefits, new open space with the provision of 221 new trees, and that does not include the 28 trees that will be retained on site. And lastly, there's a contribution towards the provision of the local infrastructure levy for this development. Therefore, officers seek that members approve the application with the recommendation set out in the beginning of the report and as amended by the addendum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jacques, for your report. Now we move on to speakers. We have a number of speakers. Firstly, I'd like to invite Caroline Pascal, who is the co-chair of the White City Residents Association and a member of the Residents Advisory Group on the White City Central Plan, speaking in objection, as well as Mr. Audley, also speaking in objection. You have 5 minutes between you, however you'd like to split that time up. And whenever you're ready, if you please come to the front and press the button on the right-hand side, and it will go green, and then you can start. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this application. I've been a resident of White City Estate for nearly 3 decades, amongst other things, and I'm the former chair of the Residents Association and trustee of the Community Centre. Caroline, who you'll hear from shortly, is the current chair of the Residents Association. We have, along with other residents, attempted in vain to meaningfully engage with the LBHF as a developer over several years. For my part, I primarily attempted to scrutinise, seek compliance with policies and legislation, and ensure that residents' rights were being protected. The various representatives of the developer did not make that easy, excuse excuse after excuse was given for not sharing important information and documentation, eventually being told that we would have access to this information when the planning submission was made. So last year I had to trawl through around 200 documents and prepare a response in less than a month. This is my response. It runs to 150 pages and sets out the policy and legislation of which there is non-compliance, as well as numerous factual errors, of which there are likely to be simple mistakes and others that appear to be designed to mislead. You may conclude, looking at the report for this meeting, that officers have done an unbelievably good job of summarising all of the objections from me and other objectors in just a few short paragraphs. Unfortunately, all the concerns raised have not been reported in the documents before you, and it is impossible for me to convey the contents of these 150 pages in 150 seconds. I note that the protocol for this meeting is that I may not ask questions. Members of the planning committee are not similarly constrained. You may therefore wish to know from officers what factual errors and what policy and legislative failures are identified by objectives, why so many of these are not contained in reports to the committee, and which would put any approval of this application at risk of being overturned under judicial review. Members of the community understand the need for new homes, and we have persistently tried to discuss alternative provision of additional housing that would be less divisive, less destructive, less harmful to the environment, and less harmful to the community. We've repeatedly proposed reuse and repurpose options, and a line was eventually added to the White City Central website in 2022 that a stock condition survey would be carried out to assess these options. We never heard anything else, although in response to a request from the GLA to confirm that options for retaining the existing buildings and structures have been fully explored before considering substantial demolition, the following statement was made to them. As per the pre-demolition audit dated October 2021 and the framework demolition and construction environment plan prepared by Arcadia dated July 2024, the options for retaining the existing buildings would have been explored. It is obviously incorrect, as the decision to demolish was taken before the Arcadia plan in 2024, and LBHF stated that they had not carried out the survey in 2022. Carol and I are here this evening, but we are not the only elected representatives who have given many hours of our time trying to persuade the developer to consider a proposal that would work not just for an incoming community, but for the existing housed community as well, and would all accept an invitation to go through this proposal and discuss an alternative way forward if LBHF should choose to give the community genuine influence. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. So just to say really quickly that I joined the Residents Advisory Panel having already stepped into, in good faith, appoint the architects and make good, because my intention from the very beginning was to ensure that wherever the situation ended up, and I'm on record, this was adopted as an intention, people would have the clear sense that they were taken through the process fully informed, fully engaged. And I just really wanted to say that's not the process as it ran. I was really shocked tonight to hear the use of the word co-production. We have objected to that in writing, in meetings, and consistently throughout. And it was in no way co-production, as I've submitted in my written testimony, and as we have made clear to Make Good and the council throughout. And I think it's really, really important to recognise that the reason that I'm here this evening is because the community has not been part of this. And my concern is not really that the community has been fooled. My concern is that you are not being given the full information, and that the way that things are being presented to you is not accurate. The distillation, the presentation, the summation does not represent in the way that was intended, and that co-production, the terminology and the intent would suggest. And I really need you to understand, as the chair of the Residents Association and as a founding member of the Residents Advisory Panel, as someone who in good faith joined that process and was dropped from it and then re-engaged, that there have been a number of different ways in which, unfortunately, the community has been marginalised, has not been able to have its voice fully heard, and that the presentation that we see this evening is the product of professional intent, professionally produced, and the best that can be said about it is that the residents have been able to provide a very thin engagement as a sounding board, numbering perhaps 3 to 5 people. Thank you.
Thank you both for your time. Thank you very much. Thanks. Okay, that brings us to our next two speakers. We have Adam Williams, excuse me, from CMA Planning, who's a planning consultant and agent. And we have Father Richard Nesbitt, who's the parish priest of Our Lady of Fatima Catholic Church and chair of the Residents Advisory Panel, speaking in support. You also have 5 minutes between you, however you'd like to split that up whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Over the last 5 years, the Council and the project team have worked closely with local residents, stakeholders, the local planning authority, the design review panel, the GLA, and key consultees in developing the design for the White City Central scheme. The site is located within the White City Opportunity Area and the White City West Strategic Site Policy Area, which has been identified as a focal point for growth by planning policy at all levels, and in particular for the delivery of new housing. In line with these policy objectives, the scheme proposes 253 new homes with a policy-compliant 50% affordable housing and 60-40 splits between social rented and shared ownership tenures. The scheme includes the building of a replacement forest school for Randolph and Beresford Nursery, with the existing building being inefficient in terms of its internal configuration and layout and falling below current standards. The new nursery will provide 10% more internal space and will benefit from high-quality outdoor space, which has been designed to meet current standards and also the nursery's requirements, including their forest school curriculum. The increased energy efficiency of the new building will reduce running costs, whilst the design ensures that the highest standards of building safety are provided for the children and staff. The proposals include the creation of a new community hub, which has been co-designed with users to ensure it is fit for purpose. The hub will house a wide range of community services together under one roof, making it more efficient and affordable for the council to sustain these services while making it easier for the community to access them. It also creates enough space on this key site within the opportunity area to build much needed new homes in accordance with policy objectives. The scheme will provide a high-quality landscape public realm, including an inclusive adventure playground and a redesigned Bridget Joyce Square, offering leisure and recreational amenities as a focus for the community. Since 2020, the Council has worked with residents on an extensive programme of engagement through a variety of different forums, aimed at reaching as wide a range of the local community as possible. These meetings and events have had over 2,500 attendees, and feedback has been received from 691 respondents, which in turn has shaped the application scheme that is before you tonight. The Council's Defend Council Homes policy was formally adopted by the Council in January 2021, after the White City Central project was already underway. The policy provides residents of council housing with extra protection if a redevelopment proposal on housing land would significantly affect their homes. Whilst the majority of this development is on general fund land, the council has nonetheless applied the principles of the policy to White City Central. This included setting up an advisory panel to ensure the residents' voices were heard throughout the design process. The continuing engagement strategy aims to maintain transparent and inclusive communication with the community. Structures are in place for ongoing resident involvement, ensuring that the project's development remains aligned with the community's vision and expectations. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Father Richard.
So like Caroline, I've been involved with the scheme from the very beginning. I became chair of the Residents Advisory Panel, not because I enjoy being chairs of committees, but just because I had recognized that this was the opportunity, the main opportunity of our generation to try to solve some of the problems of our beloved White City estate. Personally, the number one issue that most people have approached me over the years has been about housing, the heartbreak of local families being sent far away. So for the focus of this project to be on housing, trying to right that wrong, for me, I was happy to give the time and commitment to help this project be a success. And my experience in terms of co-production, the Residents Advisory Panel main mission was to make sure that the local voice was heard. The local voice helped to shape the project. I have seen a number of projects over my 12 years in White City, and the consultation process has been minimal. This was on another scale. This was genuinely wholeheartedly trying to capture and involve the voice of the local people. It was done during difficult times, of course, during the pandemic, but creative ways were constantly being sought to hear and to involve the local community. In all the different ways that people do that these days, social media, face-to-face events, fun events for different ages, different sections of our very diverse multicultural community. And I can hand on heart say that at the end of this process, I do feel that the local community has been consulted. Those who wanted to be engaged with it have had an opportunity to make their voices heard and to shape the project. Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for your time. Thank you. If you'd like to go back to your seats. If you wouldn't mind turning the mic off, please. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, thank you. Now we move on to questions for officers from committee members. So who would like to start with the questions? Any takers? Yep, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. I think we might as well start off with the obvious question of tonight, which is about the consultation and engagement question that's been raised on both accounts there. Could officers please outline the process, number of letters, reach of the letters, when letters were sent to residents, obviously as part of the standard statutory consultation process for this development?
Sorry, Councillor, just to be clear that we're talking about a statutory consultation as part of the planning application, because I think a number of these speakers are talking about the pre-application community engagement, which we were not part of.
Yeah, I wanted to go beyond that, obviously, to talk about the statutory consultation, obviously, what was required, how far did you guys reach out? Do you have any sort of timeline as to regards when you wrote to residents and how far you went to the neighbourhood, obviously, given that there is a substantial number of residences that surround this development site?
Through the chair. Councillor, on page 74 of the report of the agenda, you see there paragraph 5.27. It lists there that there was three consultation periods carried out for this application. The initial was the statutory consultation when the application was received. That started in August and ran up until October 2024. That was for 21 days. We had a second consultation just to highlight some drawings that's been received. And then lastly was the most recent third public consultation, which although it could have been 14 days, but officers gave 21 days, which is the same amount as given initially with the statutory consultation for a major development, which is 21 days. And that expired on the 21st of March, 2025.
Certainly. Now, in that you refer to it as neighbouring properties, is that just the properties that immediately overlook, or was that the entirety of the White City estate?
Yep, it's the wider estate. So the totals 2,210 homes have been sent letters.
Sure. Okay. I will pass back. Sorry. Sure. Okay. My next question was regarding the blue badge parking provision. Could you please identify, obviously, where the blue badge parking provision would be? Obviously, you say, I think, is it 3 spaces to start off with, and then obviously the ability for there to be further spaces if needs be.
Through the chair. It's looking at the master plan on the southern boundary of the proposals, which is south of blocks D, E, F, and G. There's a row of parking spaces. The ones to the east, they are all accessible parking spaces. The ones to the western half of that southern boundary, that's a reprovision of any parking spaces of the existing residents, which would be moved to that location. And again, on the western boundary to the southern end of it, there's a further row of accessible parking spaces. In terms, and that's a delivery of 10%, and it's 10% of the homes will be accessible homes, and a majority of those are on ground floor or first floor.
And as part of the allocation of the parking spaces to be on this let's say in the southern aspect, have you done a parking stress survey of that route or that section?
We have received a transport assessment as part of the application who looked into all of that detail. There's no loss of any parking for existing residents. There's a reprovision of that, but then also all future residents would not be able to obtain parking permits to stop within the wider estate. So
Okay.
no additional pressure.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Pascoe-Bure.
Thank you very much. A couple of quite diverse questions, if I may. The nursery is going to be a like-for-like replacement with 140 places. We're obviously building more homes, which means that there's going to be more demand. So is 140 going to be enough?
As part of the application submitted, the development team has explained the reason for that and said that over the last 3 years, the number in the nursery has been 140 pupils. And as I said in the presentation, that the nursery has been designed to have that. They feel that any additional children that could come from the proposed development, there are sufficient other nurseries or other facilities within the estate or within the wider area, which should be sufficient. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Turning to the hours of operation of the all-weather pitch, that I think is due to finish at 7 p.m. Surely one of the main community benefits of having this thing is that people can use it slightly later in the day, potentially. Certainly the one next to where I live is used by sort of young people till quite late at night, and that is very good because it gives them a place to blow off steam, which is in a sort of quite controlled, quite suitable area. So what was the reasoning behind 7 p.m.?
7 p.m. is the proximity of the community centre and that roof space to the residential element. The applicant the development team was acceptable of the cutout period, a time of 7 p.m. Obviously, that could be looked at in future if that's not adequate. That they can always come back and revise that condition. We would be open to looking at that. But at the moment, there's no objection to the 7 p.m. cutoff.
Yeah, just to add to Jack's point there, I mean, the benefit of that approach clearly is there's a baseline there that looks to protect the community, but if in practice the operation of the thing is seen to be seamless, and then residents can offer up their view on an extension of hours at that point in time in the knowledge of how the thing has been managed and operated up to that point. So it's a safety first approach.
Thank you very much. My next question relates to the First Lady and gentleman that spoke. It's, I think, always quite difficult for people in this committee to hear stuff for the first time, which is potentially quite material. So I want to know the possibilities of deferring consideration of this, because if there are factual inaccuracies and things that could potentially open up to us to legal challenge, then is there an argument to adequately go through these objections made in more detail before we finally make our own decision?
Jacques, if you wouldn't mind giving us your perspective on some of the concerns that Mr. Audley raised, if you have any of them to hand, or it'd be useful to hear the officer's perspective if any of the officers want to come in on that.
First off, I can start off with saying that the officer's report has been reviewed by external counsel. We had a KC go through the report, and so we feel confident that the report is written in such a way and the content of the report is safe for any future JR that might be submitted against it. The report does clarify and go into detail and responds to all the objections raised through the report. I can't really say more than that.
Again, if it's helpful, the distinction here is that the report is written in respect of a planning application. The report deals with material planning considerations. It doesn't, by definition, deal with matters that are not material planning considerations. And a number of the things that residents have raised here relate to the community engagement programme and what the council has or hasn't done in its capacity as landlord or applicant, which are completely separate from the planning process. So there's no specifics here in terms of what elements of the report they take issue with. If there are omissions from it, the chances are there because they're not material planning considerations. So just to be clear, that's the kind of context in which this report is presented tonight.
Thank you. Yes, did you have further questions? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So just to be totally clear, there are no objections to be made on behalf of certain of the residents that are material or potentially material planning considerations that have not been addressed in this report.
The answer to that would be no. Yeah, all material considerations have been addressed in the report.
Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Trey.
Hello, thank you. A couple of questions. In terms of social rent versus affordable rent, you say it breaks down into roughly 50% private, 50% social and affordable. Now, can we ask about the affordable criteria as well as the social? That the social, the council will be landlord. The affordable will be share by. Will the council continue to be landlord going forward?
Yes, and in this case, through the chair, the council will be the registered provider for the affordable homes. So what's the question in terms of affordability?
Yeah, and what is the criteria for that affordability?
Okay. 60% of the affordable homes would be social rent. So those are set at social rent levels, which is the lowest rent you can have. And the shared ownership units is capped at a maximum of 90,000 income. But that would be a range through the night up to 90,000, which is in compliance with the London plan. In terms of the shared ownership, a tenant would have to pay mortgage, but then also pay the rent on the equity that they don't own. That rent is also controlled through the legal agreement to ensure that the total housing cost, which includes all expenses, service charges, does not exceed 30% of your net income. Which is calculated as 70% of 100%, if that makes sense. So that is capped. So someone wouldn't find themselves in a position where they are in a shared ownership unit, and then the equity that they don't own, the rent goes up to become not affordable.
Just to clarify, sorry, Councillor Trey, to interrupt. So with the social rent homes, so the council, I appreciate this is a question for the housing department. It's not strictly a question for the planning department, but if you could just clarify, the council will be the landlord for those social rent homes.
As it stands at the moment, yeah, my understanding is the council will remain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Trey, yeah.
Yes, and can we speak about the green space and the ecology? You mentioned that trees will be planted, but in terms of the loss of green space, can we talk about as an overall housing development situation? I mean, what's it going to look like in terms of green space and in terms of access? For example, the nursery, it seems, are not losing a great deal of green space, but will any of that green space be accessible to residents outside of the nursery? Or is that very much an enclosed space that will not be accessible to residents? And in terms of percentages and ecology, I'm thinking of how much green space we're going to lose in terms of oxygen regeneration, oxygen generation, and environment. If we can talk to that for a minute, that'd be great.
First point, I'll start with Councillor mentioned the trees. There is a proposal to plant 221 new trees within the site. There's a loss of about, I think, 85 trees and a retention of 28. So that's definitely an improvement for us on the site. I've shown earlier on the slide the urban greening factor, which the target for that is 0.4. The proposal slightly exceeds that, so which is in compliance with policy. Coming to the play space, we acknowledge that there is a loss of about 40% of actual dedicated play within the proposals, but that is weighed up against the fact that it's a much higher quality of public open space, way more accessible to open space and play space. It also takes a flexible approach, which there's a forest school and nature garden being provided as part of that proposal, and further a variety of play options, including, like I said, the special education needs, the SEN playground, and also play on the way amenities. I think that covers it.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
If you could just remind us, what's the total number of trees on site now?
It's 113.
Okay.
That's in the present, yeah.
Yep, 113 at the moment, and at the end of the development, if it goes ahead, there would be 249.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions? No? Okay, no further questions. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to voting. Firstly, we'll vote on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed. I'll just read the recommendation out for the benefit of everyone here. Recommendation 1 is that the committee resolve that, subject to there being no contrary direction from the Mayor of London, the Director of Planning and Property, subject to there being no contrary direction from the Mayor of London, the Director of Planning and Property be authorised to grant permission subject to the conditions listed below, as amended or varied in accordance with recommendation 2 below, and subject to the completion of a memorandum of understanding dealing with the matters set out in section 28 of this report. Councillor Melton, will you be voting for, against, or not voting?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslous?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
I'll also be voting for. So recommendation 1 has been approved. Now we move on to recommendation 2, which is on page 11 of the report. Recommendation 2 is that the Director of Planning and Property, after consultation with the Assistant Director of Legal Services and the Chair of the Planning and Development Control Committee, be authorised to make any changes to the conditions listed below, which may include the amendment, addition, or deletion of conditions. Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslous?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
And I'll also be voting for. So recommendation 2 has been approved. And that brings us to recommendation 3, which is also on page 11 of the report. That is that the Director of Planning and Property, after consultation with the Assistant Director of Legal Services and the Chair of the Planning and Development Control Committee, be authorised to finalise the Memorandum of Understanding to deal with the matters set out in section 28 below. Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslous?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
I'll also be voting for. So recommendation 3, and that application has been approved. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time and for attending or watching tonight's meeting. The draft minutes of this meeting will be published on the website shortly, and they'll be formally approved at the next meeting on the 10th of June, 2025. If you have any questions or queries about the application in the meantime, please contact the case officer in the application report. Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you.